Tonight, now what we're going to do is, it's going to be a little bit kind of informal as far as the way we're going to kind of do this. And one of the reasons is I want to kind of do this thing in the role and the flow of what I normally do whenever it is that I'm out visiting. And so most of the guys here have been with me. If you've been with me, raise your hand. Okay? So you kind of got an idea, in other words, how it is that I do this thing. If you guys were to compare your notes and what have you, or in other words, not your notes, but in other words, how it is that I visit, it's going to be the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's going to change a little bit here, there, and yonder, depending on the responses. Tonight, what we're going to do is just pretty well walk right straight through, in other words, one of my visits. And what I want to do is I want to be able to, in other words, to vindicate this by you guys. So in other words, as I'm kind of going through this, if you will, in other words, just kind of give a nod, if you will, that you're just agreeing with, in other words, what it is that I'm saying. If there's something that, in other words, you want to bring out, please bring it out. Even though we're taping this, we're doing this on purpose. That way we can go back over this thing over and over and over again, or you can, as far as that goes. We're actually going to end up making, if you will, a, what we call a flash card that we're going to laminate, or we'll have them laminated. Once it is we figure out, where's kind of the order of what we're trying to do as far as that goes. I got an order right here. I'm not sure if that's exactly the way we're going to decide what needs to be done. So it's kind of a loose kind of a situation. So if you got any questions, please ask why we do what we do. If those of you that have been with me want to add to what I'm saying and what have you on that, please do so. This is not some kind of a deal where there's not going to be interaction. Matter of fact, I would actually probably welcome it as far as that goes. It seems like that way things kind of roll and flow a little bit better. So if you would appreciate you. Sister Emmy, would you go get me a Spanish flyer? I mean, both Spanish and English flyer, and I'm going to show you, in other words, how it is that I do that also. First of all, let's take a look at this thing biblically. If what we're doing, in other words, is biblical. Notice, if you will, in Luke chapter 10, verse number 1 says, "And after these things, it said, the Lord appointed other 70 also." The reason why it is that he's saying it this way, he had just got through appointing, if you will, 12 disciples, and there's where it is, he essentially, in other words, sent them out 2 by 2. It doesn't necessarily say that, but I do believe, in other words, that's what he did, in other words, with the 12. So here we see clearly the idea about, in other words, the Lord's appointing 70 also, sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself would come. The reason why I want to start here is you get people, in other words, making this statement, and I've heard this before, that in other words, that they have a hard time finding, if you will, the idea of organized visitation in the Bible. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't see how you can get any more organized than this right here of the Lord, in other words, sending out 35 teams, if you will, to go through these cities where he himself, in other words, would end up going. I believe seriously you can find exactly the same thing in the book of Matthew, chapter number 10, verses 1 and on through, of where he sent the 12 out in a same kind of a mission, of a door knocking mission kind of a situation. I think you've got the same thing, the Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 20, and I'm not going to turn to all these places. And again, in other words, we're taping this, so it's going to be available for anybody. We'll figure out how to be able to get it to you. But Acts chapter 20 says, "And I testified, in other words, to both the Jews and the Greeks, and taught them publicly and from house to house." There again, in other words, is the idea about door knocking. Acts chapter 2, the latter parts, in other words, if you will, of that chapter talks about, in other words, that they were breaking bread and from house to house. So it's the idea that they were constantly, in other words, going door to door, if you will. Have no doubts about, in other words, how this thing goes. Take a look, if you will, though, verse number 2. "Therefore he said unto them," he said, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore that the Lord of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. What I want to do is I want to try to make you guys understand that, in other words, it ain't changed any. The harvest is still great. The laborers, still few. You nail this thing down. What it is we do, ain't very many doing it.
That's right.
There's just no getting around that. But I can take you to some of the biggest churches that there are, biggest churches that there are, in other words, that have, in other words, still maintaining this, and I can show you where it is, in other words, that they're winning folks to the Lord, they're training them up and what have you with the way it is that they believe. I'm just making the statement. I'm not putting a stamp of approval on their ministry as a whole. It's just the idea, this idea that, in other words, that door knocking and what have you don't work any longer. That's not the truth.
Right.
I can take you, in other words, imagine, in other words, I can take you to Lancaster right now, and there's a church over there that goes door knocking, got bus ministries, outreach and what have you. They're running 5,000 every single Sunday. I'm not putting my stamp of approval on those guys and what it is that they believe, eternal security, premillennialism, or anything else on that line. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Just making a point. Brother Curtis is one of the largest churches it is we do have in our denomination. And he did that by soul winning, door knocking, outreach, and ministry. Buses. Brother Haynes, one of the largest churches we've ever had. In other words, certainly west of the Mississippi. Once again, soul winning, door knocking. So I shouldn't have to, in other words, defend this by no stretch of the imagination, but I will whenever it is that I have people, in other words, making the statement that you can't do it that way any longer. I'll put a stop to that nonsense, and we'll prove this thing over and over and over again. Now, what I want to do is I want to try to get into this thing just a little bit further, kind of off of kind of a rough situation right there. As you go through this thing, and you should go through it, I want you to be able to take a look at this thing, and I want you to take a look at this thing. I want you to come on down, in other words, to the end, if you will, of this whole thing. Notice, if you will, it makes the statement in verse number 17, and the 70 returned again. How does it say?
With joy.
How does it say?
With joy.
With joy. This is one of the problems that, in other words, that I believe seriously that we face when we go out visiting, door knocking and what have you. I'll be honest with you, it's a drudgery to some folks. It really is. But I think seriously the reason is because it's not being done right. It's not being done properly. And you do realize that, in other words, I can get as confrontational as anybody else can, essentially and basically, but it doesn't come off that way. It really doesn't. It doesn't have to either. So that's the idea that I think is important. It says, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven, and behold, I give you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt, what did he say, you? But he said, notwithstanding in this, rejoice not that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. I don't know about you, but one of the main things to be rejoicing over is the idea of, in other words, that your names are written in heaven, but you're also helping other people get their names written there also by this door knocking and what have you along that line. Now, one of the things it is that I want to continually do through and throughout this whole thing is I want to prove to you that you don't have to go, in other words, with a face that looks like you just was baptized in lemon juice. That's not a necessity. Matter of fact, that kind of defeats the purpose. It really does. It's the idea that, in other words, when you're walking off and you're sitting there and you're giving them this look, and we're out doing a Christian service, and what have you on that line, immediately you do realize they're thinking, I don't know if I want that or not. Right. I'm not sure if that's okay. That's the idea. We need to be very, very careful with that thing. Now, fellas, those of you that have been with me, that's not the way it is we do this thing, is it?
No.
That's not the way it is we do this thing. Matter of fact, whenever we go, and by the way, as we're going in that direction, let's kind of start to break this thing down. Whenever you go, make sure, in other words, you're ready to go. Be prepared. The idea about, in other words, make sure you got plenty of flyers. Mm-hmm. Instead of the idea of, in other words, all of a sudden realizing, in other words, you don't have enough, in other words, to carry you throughout, in other words, the day, what have you. Also, make sure you know when you got yourself a partner, who's going to do what. I think that's very, very important. It really is. Some people, in other words, and this is where you need to be careful whenever you're paired up with somebody, make sure you're paired up with somebody that if you're not comfortable, in other words, in doing the talking and what have you, make sure you go with somebody that is. I think that's the best thing. And if that's not the way it's working out, please let us know. We'll try to make sure it is we get somebody, in other words, to be able to do just exactly that. The next thing of it is, make sure you got the pencil, a piece of paper, something to write on, because we're trying to get prospects. Actually, what it is, in other words, I make the guys do this. I've got a tape recorder. Actually, the best thing to do is use your phone. If you got a smartphone, you've got a recorder on there, right? Okay. So whenever, in other words, whenever I take somebody out, I say, in other words, because you're going to have to remember these people's names. Yeah. That's what you're doing. You're there, in other words, to be able to pray for this situation, to help this situation, remember the names, the ages, just different things along that line. Matter of fact, the way it is that I've done this thing before is after I've sat there and I've done my little spiel and what have you along that line, immediately you do realize you got a lot of information real fast and what have you, and you need to get it down either on paper or something along that line. Do something, make little notes, or do something, because the idea, you realize, we're trying to get prospects. That's the idea. We're trying to, and we're going to show you how this whole thing goes. Brother Johnny was with me probably one of the last times it is that we went out. You used your phone, and here's what it is that you would do. As we were walking away from the door and what have you, he got his phone out, punched that thing like that, and began to talk into it, saying that was Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so and such at, in other words, 107, and he's sitting there, in other words, just throwing all this. Now, I'm trying to help him a little bit, just in case, in other words, he's forgetting some things and what have you. But you realize trying to get all this information can be a little bit difficult. If you guys know that, say amen. And trying to remember it. Best thing to do is do it on the spot. This trying to do it, in other words, after you get down to the end of the street, in other words, and you find out it's 11:30, and it's time to go to McDonald's and what have you on that line, immediately your mind just goes to a McDouble or a chicken sandwich or something along that line, and you can't remember what them people's names was or anything else on that line. So that's the idea. We're trying to get prospects. This is one of the things that I think we're really seriously, in other words, kind of failing at, and that's why I thought what I'd do is I'd spend some time, in other words, in working on this. So make sure you got your flyers. The idea, when you're walking up to the yard, like I said, make sure you know who's going to do what. When you're walking up to the yard, also try to stay off their grass. Now you say, Brother Danny, have you been around Wasco? Yes, I've been around Wasco. And some people, and listen, it's just one of those things where it is that people, in other words, about the time it is you think you couldn't dare, in other words, think for a second that, in other words, I'm going to hurt your yard. In other words, for me walking across it, you just never know. Honestly, there's just simply no getting around that. People don't like that. Walk on the sidewalk. Walk, in other words, on their walkway and what have you. And whenever you approach the door, make sure you position yourself, if you will, whoever's going to do the talking, that you need to position yourself so that whenever the door opens, you're the first person they see. The other person can be, in other words, close to you, but if you're not careful, they're going to open the door, see you, and then hear a voice over here. So what you need to do is you need to make sure. Now I know some of this may sound kind of not basic, or in other words, piddling as far as that goes. There's a reason for this. There really is. Also, step back away from the door whenever you do knock. Oh yeah, by the way, about knocking. Whenever you come up to the door, immediately try to figure out if they've got a doorbell. Listen to me. Whenever you punch it, if you don't hear it, then you need to knock. If you do hear it, there's no reason for knocking. Okay? So whenever you knock, make sure, in other words, it is that you find yourself a good place to knock and what have you. Make sure, in other words, you tap it pretty good. Brother John's actually used to use, I'm not sure, like a Steely or something like that. He really did. He'd go peck, peck, peck. You nail it down. You could hear that thing. And it wasn't loud. And be careful about that too, about going gang, 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 gang. Hey, how many of you know that make people mad right quick? And that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. If you know that, say amen. Right. Nobody likes that. Really don't like that. Matter of fact, on the bus workers, make sure that whoever you send to run, don't tell them don't be beating that door down. Okay, we used to have kids who would go, "Ka, ka, 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 ka." Okay, that wasn't good. That really isn't good. Okay, so that's the idea. Make sure whenever you knock on that door, in the words it is, that it's clearly heard. Give them enough time, in other words, to be able to make it to the door before you knock again or ring the bell. If you ring the bell, don't knock. Okay, so once another, yes, go ahead.
Can you knock twice?
Oh yeah. Sometimes, in other words, knocking again is fine. It really is. It really is. That's that, because you want to make sure, in other words, it is as you were. Also, if you can hear music in there, well, don't knock in time with the music. They're not going to know any difference. Okay? What you say? What do? Knock off time. Most of you white people are going to do that anyway. So I'm just making what? So it's just the idea. In other words, make sure you. Matter of fact, knock like you clap. That would probably help you out. Okay.
You mean don't?
Yeah, don't clap or whatever, or try to clap. So it's just the idea. Does anybody, everybody, okay, you've been with me when I've done that, right? You understand exactly what I'm talking about there. And that's exactly what, in other words, you got to do. You got to try to see that, in other words, it's out of time. There is somebody else there. There's somebody there. Just different things along that line. The other thing of it is walking to the yard. Okay, I'll position yourself. Okay, we did that. Okay, knocking the door or ringing. Then, in your introduction, whenever they open the door, immediately, in other words, here's what it is that I do. And the guys, in other words, will vindicate this also. Now, remember, we're gonna be giving you a flashcard later on with this thing in order. So if you're worried about taking notes, go ahead. That's fine. We're going to give you stuff a little bit later on anyway, okay? So the other thing of it is the flyer. The flyer is important. I think the guy that, in other words, is doing the talking shouldn't have to be carrying 350 flyers. That's what you got him for, okay? He's the pack mule. He's the one, in other words, that needs to be carrying the supply, if you will. Okay. I think we also, in other words, the idea of do this thing differently. I use this to separate my English from my Spanish. My English is on top. My Spanish is underneath this. This is in the middle, just in case it is. In other words, also, if you're going to leave a flyer, leave the Spanish and English one. You never know, in other words, who's there. I mean, honestly, you just have no idea. This one will cover them both, start to finish. Okay, so that way, in other words, separate this thing. Be ready, in other words, to be able to hand this thing and ready to go. So whenever, in other words, somebody opens it, here's what it is that I do. Here's how I introduce. I say, hi, I'm Danny Scott from the Free Will Baptist Church here in Wasco. Now, if you don't want to give your name, that's fine. If you want to introduce both of you, please do. Not a problem. Most of the time, I can't remember who I'm with anyway. You all know how I do that thing anyway. That would just be awkward, okay, when you can't figure out who you're with. So I stay away from that. I have no trouble with my own name. So, hi, I'm Danny Scott from the Free Will Baptist Church. I do not announce myself as the pastor. If I ever do, I do it accidentally. Simply because the idea, I just don't want anything else except for me being a Christian, period. I'm Danny Scott from the Free Will Baptist Church here in Wasco. You say, why do you say here in Wasco? Well, you act like they're in other Free Will Baptist churches. So we need to listen, folks. We sent more people to other churches like you ain't never seen alike, and that's exactly why it is. It's not that we don't have the money to get new material. Please don't misunderstand. We're looking into it, but you realize, in other words, with that picture right there, it nails it down exactly who you are to some degree. If anybody will pay attention. Now, once I do that, now watch this. And watch this. How many times out of all the guys that have been with me, how many times has somebody refused to take a flyer from me? Anybody?
Not often.
Anybody that day or those days? Anybody? Today? When you guys are out door knocking?
Like 2 people.
Talking about me?
No.
Okay, no.
I think I've seen it once.
Well, seen it once, maybe.
Yeah, not often.
Not often? Anybody else? Okay, you say, why is that? It's the way it is that I do it. What I do is I always do this. Hi, I'm Danny Scott, and I'm from the Free Will Baptist Church here in Wasco. And see, what I do is I immediately move, in other words, towards the idea that what I'm doing. Also, if you're going to enunciate anything in your introduction, what should you enunciate? Is the word Baptist. Kick that word Baptist out there just as much as you can. Why? You need to comfort those people that you're not Jehovah's Witnesses, that you're not Mormons, that you're not selling something. Of course, some Baptists would do that anyway, but you understand what I'm saying? Immediately get that out there and get that flyer out there also, in other words, in front of them. So that way, in other words, immediately, they're going to take it. Now, if you're confident that the idea that it's somebody in English, hand them the English one, okay? If you're confident. If you're not, if they do this, no sabes inglés, like that, immediately, hopefully you're with somebody that, in other words, that can take it up. Let them have at it. If you're not, do like I do. I do this broken Spanish thing, and it's embarrassing, folks. It really is. So I just do this broken Spanish thing as far as that goes, like that, and I let them know that, in other words, like we have a Spanish church, and I'll try to do the best I can there, and let them know this, and just simply, in other words, hand this to them, if you will, or in other words, do the single Spanish one, if you will, like that. Let them know you have a Spanish and English church. That really helps, and I'll show you that in just a minute. A little bit further in this situation, whenever you're doing this, once again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to bridge a gap. So what you're going to do there is, if in other words, neither one of you can speak Spanish, and you can't do anything with that situation, here's what it is that I do. I sit there and I say, okay, you get a chance, come and visit us, okay? And then I'll say, I'll ask them, ¿Cómo se llama? And what I'll do there is immediately, in other words, I'll at least get a name. So that prospect, in other words, now is going to go to who?
Spanish.
The Spanish church. It's now up to them. Okay? Now it's up to them. Okay? They have a flyer. We came by. You guys getting this thing? That's the idea. Now, so let's go just a little bit further. That's the idea. If you're turning about the Spanish and English thing. Now, again, if you don't want to tell them your name, that's fine. I think it helps the idea that, in other words, you're not afraid to tell them who you are. I'm Danny Scott from the Free Will Baptist Church here in Wasco. And usually what I do is I don't do hardly anything except for I go right into my next deal is we are just out meeting some of the families in the community. Okay, now this is how you can change it up. You can say anything you want to. I'm just showing you how it is that I do that. We're out meeting some of the families in the community, trying to find out who's Christian and who's not. Now, Brother John's is the one it is that I got that from. And there's a reason why it is that he does it, I do it. If you're not comfortable with that and want to go to the church thing, that's fine. That's okay. That's not a problem. I think we can probably get to some degree where it is, in other words, at the same place as far as that goes. I believe so. Okay? We're just out meeting some of the families in the community trying to find out who's Christian and who's not. Are you folks Christians here? Now, when I do that, you realize, in other words, now it's on them, in other words, to be able to start giving me something, in other words, from that point. If you guys see that, say amen. Amen. Now, it almost doesn't make any difference what they say to some degree. If they make the statement, in other words, the idea, well, we're Catholic. What I do is immediately I say, and sometimes, I do this. Don't worry about doing this. Sometimes what I want to do, I want to find out, say, oh, okay, do you guys go to church? Do you guys go there all the time? Which Catholic? I actually make them tell me which Catholic church, because people go to all the way to McFarland, Delano, they go to Shafter, stuff along that line. First of all, what I do is I make them tell me where. That'll help find out how much. Then sometimes I even ask them what the priest's name is. Of course, I do that, in other words, sometimes, in other words, the Baptist. What's that pastor's name? And I say, why in the world would you do that? Find out, in other words, how well he knows the church. So whenever, in other words, they say, oh yeah, well, we go pretty well every Sunday. Okay, they just told you something, didn't they? Mm-hmm. We pretty well go every Sunday. Well, immediately there's where it is, they don't go all the time. They are not faithful. So immediately I just roll over that. I really do. I say, well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to a Christian church? Now, does anybody know why I asked them that? Anybody have any idea? The reason I ask them that is do they have any kind of Christian influence in their life through their family, friends, or whatever else along that line? I'm trying to find out, have they ever heard a clear presentation of the gospel? Okay, that's what I'm trying to do. If they say no, they have not, I said, well, I was just going to let you guys know that also. The next thing I do is I'm looking to, who am I talking to? If it's a Hispanic individual, and I can detect, in other words, just a hint of an accent and what have you, the first thing it is that I'll do is I'll ask them the question, are you more comfortable in Spanish or in English? Why would I ask them that? Actually, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find out, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to find out, of course, that what I ask, don't misunderstand me, but immediately whenever they make the statement one way or the other, I say, because we have a Spanish church also, is the reason why I'm asking. Okay? I'll also ask them, who am I talking to some degree. If it's clearly, in other words, the man of the house, the woman of the house, you know, you might be able to go there, because many times mom and dad is in the house back there someplace. Is it just you and your husband, or just you and your wife here? So see, what I'm doing is I'm going inside the house. The reason why I asked them, in other words, about the idea they're more comfortable with Spanish and English is simply to begin to start to introduce our ministries.
Yeah.
Once it is, in other words, I tell a Hispanic individual, this white boy has got, in other words, not only an English church,
No Spanish.
but I've got also a Spanish church. Think what you want, believe what you want, do what you want. You realize one of the biggest problems that there is, period, in Christianity, if that's what you want to call it, is the idea you have the Hispanic Assembly of God and you've got the English Spanish Assembly of God. You've got the Spanish, in other words, First Baptist Church, the English in separate parts of town. When all of a sudden they realize the idea we're together in one place, you wouldn't believe, in other words, what it is that will say to somebody.
That's right.
So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to introduce, in other words. Now, if they've got a Catholic background, immediately, Catholics, in other words, don't have classes for their kids, do they? We also have classes for our kids. And every single, now, I guess you guys go to Sunday sometimes. We also have services on Sunday night and Wednesday night. Now, those are all, we also have classes, in other words, for those kids. That way, if the kids came and what have you, does this sound familiar? If the kids did come, they would have their own class. Now, don't misunderstand me. They don't have to go. But I mean, in other words, just the idea, if in other words, if they'd like to go, they're certainly welcome to go as far as that goes. In other words, and so the classes for every age group, start to finish, from nursery all the way, in other words, including sometimes, in other words, for the teens. By the way, how many kids do you have? You guys see where I'm going? I'm walking inside that house, ain't I? Without stepping a foot in there. So, I got, whatchamacallit over here, supposed to be getting all this stuff, right? Okay, so, oh yeah, well, I've got 2 kids, 3 kids. Well, what are their ages? Just an idea, in other words, like that. Well, I got 1, 2, I got 1, 3, or something. See, 5 or 6 or 7, like that. Okay, immediately what you're doing is, oh yeah, we've got classes for every one of those kids. Guys, is this what I do or not?
Yes.
I do this all day long, don't I? Rarely am I ever stopped or anything else on that line. Matter of fact, when you sit there and you tell a Catholic individual you've got classes for kids, you realize I've actually seen them perk up.
Yep.
Why is that? Anybody have an idea?
Not the right.
They don't have classes, but what's the point about that? It's wrestling and hassling kids, trying to get them to sit still and what have you. Do they get anything out of it? Okay. Is anybody getting this thing? Oh, also, I was going to let you know that we also have you got 3, 4 kids. Oh, okay. That's good. We also have a bus. Hello? And so, in other words, we pick up some of the kids here, in other words, in the area and what have you. I might want to think about where I'm at necessarily. Of course, anymore, I really don't know. But yeah, some of the kids, in other words, here in the area and what have you, pick up some of the kids like that. So if you're interested for some of the kids maybe riding or something, we'd love to have them come as far as that goes. Okay? Now, any questions? Any questions so far? Okay? Is it just you and your husband? Is it just you and your wife? So your mom and dad lives here with you. Now, watch this now. Where am I going to go now? Are they more comfortable in Spanish or English?
Right.
How many times have you guys heard me do the same situation? Okay. Am I walking through that house and taking an inventory of any and everybody, in other words, that there is in there, start to finish? Does this go smooth? 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 Okay? I just took a complete, in other words, inventory of that whole household, start to finish, with ages and everything else on that line, didn't I? Now, let's get away from the Catholic thing, because the reason why I wanted to bring that out is that's what you're going to probably get almost more than anything. Well, if they go back to the idea, they sit there and say, we used to go to church. Oh, okay. Listen to me now. What kind of church background do you have? You say, why in the world you want to go there? You need to find out whatever their church background is. It going to be a help, a hurt, or a hindrance? You got to ask yourself that question. And you say, well, what if they say Baptist or Pentecostal? It doesn't make a bit of difference in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Mm-hmm. It just gives you an idea. It just gives you an idea, in other words, where to go to. Same thing, in other words, the idea if that Catholic individual told me, in other words, they've been to a Christian church. So what am I going to ask them?
I've probably got to deal with them.
Yeah, I asked them the idea of what? Well, when you was in that church, what kind of church was it? So I want to see if there's enough gospel there, in other words, to be able to deal with them. Mm-hmm. So, now, some of you looking at me kind of funny and say, I'm not going to go there. Understand that, realize that. But how about just taking the inventory and let somebody else go back? Mm-hmm. Basically, just get some of the basic inventory of who's in that house. Okay? From that point right there, if let's say, well, I've got a Baptist background immediately, in other words, that can be a problem. Right. It really can. Well, how long did you go? I'll ask them the idea, do you ever get saved? Mm-hmm. I want to see if they know, in other words, the verbiage, the jargon, if they know what I'm talking about. And you guys have seen me, in other words, go even deeper and deeper in there. And don't worry about that. That'll be some other sessions that we'll do if you want to go through that. I'm trying to make this thing very, very basic. Okay? I really, really am trying to make this thing very, very basic. Okay? Yeah. So, and like I said, I'm just trying to find out what their church background is. Okay? Now, I'm going to wind this thing up. I've never done this before in my life. He said, well, we'd just like to invite you, in other words, to come. You're looking to see if there's any kind of interest that they might come. You're looking just to see if there's something, in other words, there. Actually, that's exactly, in other words, what it is that you're looking for. You're looking for some kind of... Now, you got all the information it is that you needed, start to finish, didn't you? Mm-hmm. You could actually walk away from there. You could build, in other words, prospect list out of that whole situation for the kids, mm-hmm. for in other words, the adults. If it's a lady, of course, in other words, there's the lady. Mm-hmm. If it's a guy, same situation. You also found out if there was a mister. If there's a mister, then that could be a prospect, in other words, for us to go back on. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, if we know that there is a husband there. Got to go back to the idea. We'd like to invite you. Then start to break down the services, in other words, in the ministries. Mm-hmm. Try to start breaking that thing down. Of course, the kids ministries. Every class, every service, start to finish. The bus. Clothing, if you want to. Food ministry. Throw that in there, depending on, in other words, where it is that you're at. I'm not sure if, in other words, if you were on Silver Tree Estates, that'd be something. But maybe you never know. Just thought I'd just bring that up. Then what you're doing is who's in that house? You say, well, what are you trying to do, brother? We're trying to get prospects. Because you know what? I heard a statistic many, many years ago. I cannot get it vindicated. I know I didn't dream it. Brother Johns is the one that told me that it takes 38 visits to win somebody to the Lord. And we're not talking about 38 visits straight in a row.
Right.
We've tried that.
Right.
Here in this church, we've done that. Straight in a row. 3 in a week. No, it's just, okay, I'm just making... So that's not it. It's got to be something, in other words, it is where God is working, doing, and dealing like that. 38 visits is what it takes. What are you trying to do? What we're trying to do is we're trying to get prospects. We're looking for a reason to come back. Now, let me finish this thing up right quick. Any questions? Yes.
What do you do if there's no parents, just kids?
I'm sorry.
What do you do if there's no parents, just kids?
What you'll do is depending on the age and what have you, you need to be very, very careful with that right there. try to figure out, just get a generalized name or something along that line so you can come back. But you already, I've actually, in other words, depending on where I'm at and what the situation is, I'll actually, do you have any other brothers or sisters? See, I'm trying to, I mean, it's hard, in other words, to go with me in the sense of the idea of trying to keep all that information,
Yeah.
isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
You walked off and goes, right?
Right.
It is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But see, that's the idea. I mean, I can just do it that, and you can too. It's not because I've been doing this for 39 years.
That's right.
It really isn't. If you'll cut to the chase, this don't take that long. And you've got to go with what you're comfortable with. I understand that. I realize that. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to turn you into me.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't going to help nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that didn't sound very good.
But it was true.
Edit that part out. So I'm just trying to make the statement, the idea, you need to be you. Okay? So what we're trying to do is...
Did you answer his question?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, kids. Yeah, let me go back to the kids. It just depends. As a matter of fact, who was with me? Somebody actually, in other words, got a little huffy about the idea that I talked to the kids.
Oh,
That was you. Who went back?
me and him went back.
Went back. There you go. This is good. And you got a little huffy about the whole thing, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell him how you got unhuffy. Didn't you make the statement? The idea.
Oh, yeah. We made the statement that he said, why were you talking to my kids without my permission? And they said, and we told him that the kids said you were asleep, and that's why we're here, to get your permission now to ride the bus.
Yeah, there you go.
And he said, no, they don't have my permission. And we said, okay.
Okay, yeah. So that's the idea, and I understand that's a good deal. It really is. This is the first time that's ever happened. That's the first time it has ever happened. Most of the time what I do is, and also I stand back when I talk to kids. I make sure, in other words, it's a clear view and no uncertain terms. I just try to find out information of the idea, do you have other brothers and sisters? Do you all go to church any place? Okay, so he was with me and what have you, so I could get all this vindicated as far as that goes. So just try to figure out, in other words, whether that's the thing to do. You can just immediately say, well, what's y'all's last name? Get that right there. Come back from Mr. and Mrs. Come back. At least you got one child to work with, do with, and deal with. I try to get as much information as I can. But like I said, that did come back, so that's good. That's a good question. Anybody else? Fixing to finish this thing up. Okay, what are you trying to do? We're just simply just trying to come back. That's the idea. What are you trying to come back with? We're trying to come back with the best person to send back. Dealing with the idea about age. One of the main things it is that I do is I sit there and I ask them what? Somewhere along the line, what do I ask them? I do. I ask them. I don't care. The reason is I'm trying, because I'm really bad with ages. I really am. I'm really bad with ages. Just no getting around that. I mean, I have no idea how old people are. I don't care. No, it's just, I'm really bad about that. I really am. So that way, immediately what I do is I ask the question simply so it is, in other words, that he can write this thing down or somebody can. So I need to send the right people back there, don't I?
Yes.
So why not do it by age? If they know that you've got a young adult group, in other words, that's doing things like that, and there's maybe a speck of interest and what have you, you put them on your prospect list, and in other words, next time you guys have whatever you have, like that, in other words, you could invite them, okay? If they're older, like we send Brother Chad, or something along that line, if they're quite a bit older. Now, what if they come up there, and there's a big old ugly white boy. Yeah. Here am I, Lord, send me. And well, you know what I'll do? I'll say, I'm doing just fine. How are you doing there? That'll be a Tootsie Roll or something, though, just in case you're wondering. So that's the idea. Well, you need to send back, in other words, the right person.
Right.
Try to figure out who it would be. As a matter of fact, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for suggestions of who to send back. Maybe you can tell their background. In other words, for you guys are going to get the good stuff. Everybody else is going to be okay. So that's the idea. Who are we trying to send back there? You're looking for the idea about the age, the background. If you can tell, if you can see they're all tatted up and what have you on that line. I mean, just ask the question. I mean, who do you think the best person would be? And don't get me wrong. I can work, do, and deal with any and everybody. I really can. So don't misunderstand me. That in other words, that I'm glad to go back to anybody. In other words, you want me to go back to. Period. The same thing, same interests. We talked about that. That right there is probably one of the. Let's say in other words, he's got this NRA stickers all over the place, and he's got in other words. Ammunition up on his wall. He's got a.
He's already a Christian.
Huh? No. That is to slide forward again or something or anything along that line. So, you guys understand what it is that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Somebody interested in cars. They're out there, in other words, working on the car. Something. I'm talking about not just to be able to get to work, but I mean they got a real car. So you see, you're trying to get somebody, in other words, that's able to come back. If you can see that, in other words, they're into all these little doilies and little knickknackies and what have you along that line, what have you. Okay, yeah, stuff like that. Okay, it's trying to send back, in other words, the right person, in other words, to be able to try to try to link up with these individuals. So everybody understand what it is we're trying to do here? What we're trying to, now this is very, very basic. I understand that and realize that. And as soon as you get to the point where you sit there and say, well, what if I run into a Jehovah's Witness, a Mormon, I run into an apostolic, I run into a renegade, whatever along that line. Don't worry about them folks. Honestly, don't worry about them folks. Simply, in other words, what we're going to do is we're going to try to get specialized individuals. If there's some kind of a cult or an ism and what have you, most of the time I'm going to take care of them as far as that goes. We're going to try to get specialized individuals. It's not that I can't deal with a Catholic, but the smartest thing to do is, in other words, get somebody that comes from a Catholic background, in other words, would deal with it. Because one of the first things is, back in the day when I did do that, they'd ask me, well, were you ever Catholic? Well, immediately, in other words, there was a wall that came up.
Yeah.
But if you get somebody that's come out of that situation, as far as I really believe seriously, that's a thing. It's like the idea about, in other words, doesn't your family have an Adventist background or something like that? Okay, see, there's somewhere along the line that'd be good to specialize in that situation to some degree, because you can say that you came from that or whatever, not came from it, but in other words, have worked with it, dealt with it, done with it, or something along that line. So that's what one of the other things is we're going to try to do, get people that'll specialize in certain things along that line. We're also going to try to get to the point where, in other words, whenever you're making, in other words, follow-up visits, we're going to try to get you more tracts to be able to give to them. We're going to try to get you CDs, DVDs with testimonies and just different things along that line. If you're uncomfortable, in other words, in just trying to work and do and deal with these folks as far as that's not a problem. But what would be good is if, in other words, you were to leave like a CD, a DVD, or something like that presents the gospel. One would be CD, would be audio. DVD would be something video, something that, in other words, that they could watch or something along that line, be able to get that in their hands as far as that goes. And you say, well, what's the point of that? Turning around and following that up and asking them, did you watch that? Did you take a look at that? Just different things, numbers along that line. Okay, just quickly, we're about ready to wrap this up. Any questions? Any questions? I know I went through this thing pretty fast. Like I said, well, we're going to pretty well, in other words, make a flash card that, in other words, that you can put in your Bible. We're going to make it so it is, in other words, it'll be maybe two-sided. One side it might be big enough, I'm not really sure, so it can fit in your Bible. We want to make it so that it'll fit even in smaller Bibles and stuff like that. So if you're ever wondering, in other words, what to ask or something along that line, want to kind of go over it before you go out or something along that line, let us know. Also, the follow-up visits. If you need more stuff to do in a follow-up visit, please let us know. We'll get you tracts. We'll get you, like I said, the CDs, the DVDs, just anything, in other words, along that line to be able to put something in their hand that can speak to them, in other words, while we're not around. Whenever they get time, can't sleep, whatever else along that line. Any questions? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and let's pray. Father, we pray just now, Lord, that you just bless this time together. Lord, use this. I pray that you would, Lord. It's simply, in other words, just somebody just trying to do what the Bible says. He that winneth souls is wise. We need to have wisdom whenever it is we're out there, in other words, just talking to folks. And Lord, love you today. Thank you. Appreciate those it is that are really interested, Lord, in being able to know how to be able to get prospects and how to be able to present, Lord, in other words, just our church to the community. Lord, I thank you for them and ask you to bless in Jesus' precious name we pray. All of God's people said amen.
Amen.
Amen. You all dismissed.